quiet, sentiment, benevolent. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell boom, for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Om Amoga Vairocana Maha Mudra Mani Padma Javala Pragataya
Please stand for the chanting of the three refuges. English translation, please repeat after me. I go for refuge to the Buddha.
I go for refuge to the Buddha
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
And realize the great way.
and realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma.
I go for refuge to the Dharma
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings.
I will penetrate the teachings
And uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha.
I go for refuge to the Sangha
And resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
And transform this world into Buddha land unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return for another short period of meditation. Please join in these simple stretching exercises. Bringing your focus each moment to, right now, the fingers pressing across the top of the scalp and down behind. And then thumb and first fingers on the earlobes and gently stretching. Knuckle of the right hand, first finger, just below the nose. And then leaning forward, stretching the spine, chin back, eyes back. Breathing. Consciously going slow, stretching the arms up. Head back, eyes back. And breathing. And folding forward. Inhaling as the body opens up, stretches. And exhaling as we fold to be my left. Being in each posture in each moment, breathing embodied. Inhaling up and exhaling, folding forward. Inhaling up and lacing the fingers behind, bringing the shoulders back, shoulder blades together. Inhaling and then exhaling forward. Inhaling up and keeping the spine straight. Twist first one way. Head and eyes around to the very back. And then inhale going forward and exhale going back. Twisting the spine, massaging the whole nervous system, which is integral to the spinal column. And inhale forward. Placing the hands at the bottom of the torso. Inhaling. And then exhaling. Round inhaling up and exhaling down. And then change direction, inhaling up as the body opens and exhaling as the body closes. Bring one hand under your arm, keeping the other arm straight and by your ear. Exhale over. And change. Seeing how the breath naturally comes in and out as the body moves. And bringing the elbows wide, again straightening the spine. Hips a little forward, hip bones. Coming to twist first to one side. And then turning to the other. Forward then, Bringing the arms stretched so that you can feel the stretch from your waist. Drop. 4 times and then 5. And then making a little bow. And stretching your legs if you need to. Moving a little closer to the screen if you need to. As Hayun offers the Dharma talk at this morning's service. Hayun is one of our Dharma teachers. Here she comes.
Here I come. Sun is shining radiantly over everything here in our Ann Arbor temple today. Our garden, our pond, a field of clover. Get a sense that birds, animals, insects, worms, fish, humans, plants are all singing the body electric together this morning, rejoicing in this grand summer day. Welcome in from the 10 directions, everyone. It's good to be with you. As Haju mentioned, my name is Hayun. I am a Dharma teacher here at the temple. And I have a few stories for you today, a few observations. I wanted to start with a story that is a Jataka story. Before I start, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Jataka stories. They're made up of 547 separate stories. Some of them are just a few sentences long, and some of them are really long. And each of them is about a deep sort of ethical, moral, or internal dynamic dimension of what the Sangha during the Buddha's time is going through. And the Buddha says, I remember the time when, and then he goes on to tell a story or a parable. And sometimes the Buddha and his compatriots, it's about him in his former lives with the other disciples in their former lives that he refers to. And he sometimes is a human, but other times he is an animal like an antelope or a monkey or an elephant or a snake. Sometimes he takes on the form of celestial beings like a great Naga serpent king or something even bigger called a Garula. But that's why they're kind of known as children's stories. And there are some that are really beautiful for children. But the vast majority of the 547 tales are not really for children as much as they are for us. Children of all ages, I guess, but the one I'm going to talk about today really has more adult sort of connotations to it. And what I'm going to tell today is actually from the Jataka Atthaka, which is the stories that were happening in the Sangha itself at the time of the Buddha, which led him to tell the Jataka tale. And these are very old as well. They're actually not part of the Pali Canon, but they're deemed scriptures. And the last translation in English of the Jataka Atha scriptures was in 1896. So they're old in so many ways, but they're really cool. And they really reflect all of the dimensions of problems we as human beings have on this earth today. So this one is called the Losaka Tisa Jataka. And it starts in a town that is near India. They're all sort of near where the Buddha lived. and this was a town that was a fishing village, and they lived a very simple, beautiful life in this village. And then one day, there were no more fish. And they went day after day after day, catching no fish. And they thought, what is going on? We're all going to starve. This is terrible. Fishermen would come home with empty nets. Their families could not eat. So they wanted to get to the bottom of it. And so what they did is they split into two. And then one set of the fishermen would come home with fish, and the other set would not. And they kept dividing like this until they isolated one family. And the woman who was the mom in the family had just conceived, was pregnant. And so this was deemed to be like the karmic problem, this pregnancy, what started all of the town's woes. So they shunned this family, threw them out very cruelly. And the family had nothing. They were just sort of groveling around and searching for food where they couldn't really get a job anywhere. And her son was born, a beautiful boy, but he never could get enough to eat. He always scrounged, and they did. And so finally, his family gave him a shard and said, go off and beg, which they did regularly. But his family left. So they just left him there on his own because they felt that he was the source of all their bad fortune. And so he lived in this city, same city where the Buddha and his disciples lived. And he really just begged for a living. They called him sort of a little rat. He was just kind of one of the kids on the streets looking for food. And the people who owned sort of inns would, at the end of the day, throw out just extra rice onto the pavement. And he was one of the kids that would run and eat the rice off the pavement that was thrown out. So it was a very sad life he was leading. And he never bathed. He never took care of himself. Just a little boy, really about 8. And one day, the great disciple of the Buddha, Sariputra, remember that name because I'm going to carry his name through this little talk. He saw this little boy on the street, and his heart just broke open when he saw this young person he says, where are your parents? I don't have any parents, he said. They left me just to be by myself to beg. Sariputra looked at him gently and he said, would you like to become a bhikkhu? And the little boy's eyes got really large. He says, I would, but I don't think there's anyone that would have me. And Sariputra said, I will have you. I will sponsor you. So the young boy took his ordination as a monk. He got his hair shaved. Sariputra himself bathed him. And he became a bhikkhu and part of the Buddha's circle of monks and nuns. And he studied diligently. He was really a fervent practitioner. And throughout the years, he grew, and the various levels that they had of stages of enlightenment, he grew through. And he was really quite a beautiful practitioner, and his name was Losakatissa. That was his Buddhist name that he was given. But what Sariputra noticed is that he never got enough to eat still. That when he held his alms bowl out, for some reason, he would only get a little rice, but it appeared as though his bowl was full. So people would pass him over and give the rice to the next bhikkhu. And when there were beautiful curries and all, there was this delusion that his bowl had food when in fact it didn't have any. So he got thinner and thinner and thinner and less to eat. And Sariputra was very concerned. And he had a dream that very day Losakatissa would pass on. And so he ordered some monks underneath him to go out and get food for Losakatissa. And they came back, and so he was out with them. And he sent them back with a lot of food for Losakatissa. And the monks forgot, and they ate it all themselves. So Sariputra comes home and says to him, "Oh, Losakatissa, did you really enjoy the food that..." He says, "I'm sure I would enjoy the food, but none was brought to me." He said, "What?" And he realized what had happened, that the monks had forgotten. And he saw this young man, and he just saw how thin he was. But it was after 11, and they weren't supposed to eat after 11. But Sariputra said, this is wrong, that this guy is going to pass away. And so he went to the king's house himself, and he got this big bowl of food, and he brought it back. And Losakatissa said, "I can't eat this in your presence, master. It breaks the rules." And so Sariputra just kind of started crying, and he says, "There are no rules. I want you to have this. But I know unless I continue to hold this bowl, the food will vanish." So Sariputra held the bowl, and Losakatissa had the one meal of his life that was beautiful, filled with sweet curries and all kinds of beautiful vegetables, and he really enjoyed it. But after that meal, he lied down, and that very afternoon he passed on. And Sariputra knew it was going to happen, but still his heart broke with compassion, and he really took this young man under his wing. So that is the story, and it ends there. It doesn't have a happy ending. And there are so many ways you can go with it, from the actions of his parents or his town, the actions of Sariputra and his great compassion that he showed. But what I'd like to really go off of today as a theme is that sort of balance of yearning and contentment that we all feel. Obviously, Losakatissa had a yearning for food. He could never find enough food. And yet, after he went along the path, he found that there were things more important than food, even though he could never get enough food. And so his contentment grew while his yearning shrank. And so there was that balance there of yearning and contentment. And he sort of found one through the other. And at the end of the day, he died a contented life, even though it was shortened because of his karmic past, which probably from lifetimes before then, where he didn't get enough to eat. And so he really surpassed that. And so for me, what that brings up in my mind is, what are the times in my life where I've felt hungry, where I felt like I just could never get enough? And I think all of us have that. It's not like we're contented all the time. We all have parts of our lives, and it may not be about food, but it might be about something else, where we feel like there just can't be enough. And what will really solve that craving, and what will make us feel whole? And it's hard to talk about this without talking about the link that we have with our skandhas inside of us when we talk about yearning and how to kind of rise out of our yearning. The skandhas are pretty, basic Buddhist teachings, but I feel like we can't get enough of them because they're really so present with all of us. And I also think that we all talk about them differently, that, the stories that someone might have with their skandhas are different, but they all help us to learn. So I'm going to dig a little bit into the skandhas. They're also called aggregates. They're translated into the word aggregates or heaps. And they are basically how our sort of consciousness deals with all of the things that come at us every day, either through actions or words or feelings. So the first skandha, there's 5 of them. The first is form. And skandhas can take any shape. It can be as benign as the cushion I'm sitting on, or it can be a difficulty that I'm having with a person. We call them clinging skandhas because they become sort of tangled up in who we are. So the first skandha is form. So when you think of form, think of our 5 senses, and then think of thought. We add on thought to that. So it's mouth, nose, ears, eyes, touch, and thought. So when I'm sitting on my cushion, I know I'm sitting on my cushion. So that's my form. Then we get into feeling. And it's not about hurting feelings. I think sometimes we kind of get tripped up in this word and we think about, well, you're hurting my feelings. But when we talk about feeling this way, it's really about just basic 3 terms like positive, negative, and neutral. So I'm sitting on my cushion. It feels kind of positive. It feels like this is a good cushion for me. But that's all it is, because then we move on to sort of a deeper sense of perception. And that's really a deepened sense of the forms, or the feelings, where the feeling is just positive, negative, or neutral. The perceptions, we start getting more into how we're really sensing it. So this cushion I'm sitting on is really comfortable. I have a little thread on it. It just feels like me. I feel cozy in this cushion. It just kind of sits right. So that's a perception. Then we get into the one that is everyone's favorite, mental formations. Mental formations are the stories that we tell about ourselves, like our whatever we're going through. So with this cushion, it would be about, oh my gosh, I almost lost this cushion when I went to Toronto once because it got thrown in with 100 other cushions and I had brought it specifically for me. And then I had to scrounge. So those are the kinds of stories we tell each other in our mental formations. And then the final skanda is called consciousness. So that's sort of the synthesis of every other skanda. It is, all of our stream of thoughts that happen all the time when sometimes we're in meditation, but always when we're not in meditation, we're not sleeping. We have this sort of stream of thoughts, and it sort of completes the experience of separateness. Right? Because I've really gotten into my stories at this point. It's about me. It's not about this cushion. So I wanted to share with you an example that's a little more meaningful than, cushion, my bottom, how I feel. Something happened last week. There's a person here at the Sangha who I really care for deeply and really admire a great deal. We were meeting, and they said to me, Hayun, we didn't really like the idea you came up with at the meeting. In fact, it kind of made us feel uncomfortable. So, what's Hayun's reaction? Let's go through the skandhas. First of all, form entered my ears. I'm hearing this from someone. Feeling, positive, negative, neutral. Definitely the negative for me. As I'm hearing this, it doesn't seem like, Hayun, you're a wonderful person. It seems like, Hayun, we were really uncomfortable with what you said. Third skandha, perception. So this is where Hayun gets into, I don't really feel good about this. And my sort of animal instincts sort of kick in, like, I need to defend myself here. And so you get kind of start getting into the waves. You can see how it's more about me at that point than it is about just what was said. And what was said was pretty innocuous, but I took it really as, sort of about me deeply. And then the mental formations start arising, like, what does this mean? There are people who actually think that I could say something that would be so uncomfortable that it made them uncomfortable. And oh my gosh, how could I ever have done that? And I remember the time when I did this before, that somehow I've made people feel uncomfortable, and that makes me feel so bad, because I never want to make anyone feel uncomfortable in a way that they feel put off by me. And then consciousness. So consciousness is obviously the really deep one. When babies are in their womb, they have everything they need. They have food whenever they want it through the umbilical cord. They have warmth. And then suddenly you're put into the world as a baby and I'm cold. I'm cold. Then you say, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. we have all these needs. And so that's how our consciousness kind of grows. And then when we get older, we have memories to add on and goals and initiatives and relationships. So the consciousness stream gets quite complicated as we get older. Thanissaro Bhikkhu sort of describes these as an amoeba. He said it's not always linear. So what I described to you was sort of a linear reaction that I had. But oftentimes it's really much more amorphous. Like, I could have a thought about something and then have a feeling about it. So don't think of it as just linear. And ultimately what the Buddha would tell us is that all of these skandhas that we cling to are kind of building this sense of I, me, my. And the Buddha would tell us that to be released from the suffering of these skandhas, we have to get away from the I, me, my. And so you've heard this term before, I'm sure, the sort of non-self term. It is anatta. It's one of the, it's one of the three characteristic of existence, which I'm not going to get into. I will leave that to another Dharma talk at another time, probably from another person. But anatta, in the sense of non-self, is something that's really misunderstood, because people think it's about like turning into a zombie and just leaving all that makes you beautiful and who you are and human behind, but it's not. It's about releasing yourself from the pain and suffering that comes from those stories of, I am not worthy, I am this, I always do things wrong, how can you continue to behave like this? And so you can see how it just becomes this sort of tangle that we get into. So I wanted to illustrate this and to illustrate sort of the way out. I wanted to tell another Sariputra story. One time Sariputra went on a retreat, and at this retreat, he went for months, came back, and you could tell the radiance in his face that he had really transformed. And he was already pretty transformed to begin with. And so the monks started asking him questions, and he says, I really feel content. I really feel like I am at the point where things don't trigger me anymore. So Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, said to him, even if the Buddha were to die tomorrow, you would still be content? Sariputra looked down and he said, well, I would be sad if the Buddha died, because he's really a good friend. I really love him. But what I'm not going to get into are the stories around, oh no, my teacher is gone. What is going to happen to me? Oh no, what will happen to our Sangha when we have no teacher? Those are the kinds of stories that the skandhas bring up. And I think that that's sort of the demarcation that Sariputra was teaching us in that story. And to illustrate just a little further, I have a couple little books here to show that good things can come in little packages. This one is called The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down by Heyman Sunim. And so he illustrates this in a beautiful way. He says, if I had to summarize the entirety of most people's lives in a few words, it would be endless resistance to what is. As we resist, we are in constant motion trying to adjust, and yet we still remain unhappy about what is. That's how the skandhas tangle us up when we cling to them. If I had to summarize the entirety of an enlightened person's life in a few words, it would be complete acceptance of what is. As we accept what is, our minds are relaxed and composed while the whole world changes rapidly around us. Yeah. So how do we begin our journey to to get there, what Hemin Sunim was talking about and what Sariputra was referring to, that contentment, that sort of end of yearning that draws us in to the skandhas. The first thing that I have been learning about lately is a much more deep dive into self-empathy. So it's a term, it's a jargony term we've heard a lot, but I've been in this course where we've been talking about giving that first, that is your first step. You can't operate unless you give yourself empathy. So rather than my saying, Hayun, how could you possibly make someone feel uncomfortable? Stop that line of thought. Say, Hayun, there's a lot of times that you make people really comfortable. Wow, you're great in that way. You have a real gift in making people comfortable. And the fact that you didn't do it in this one time doesn't mean that never again will you make people comfortable. So self-empathy, and your story could be very different than that one. I'm giving you my story, but we all have our stories. So self-empathy, then moving into empathy for the other person. The person who said that to me, it's really wonderful. It's probably one of the most sensitive, emotive people I know in the Sangha. So, I'm just going to take that for what it is. It was an honest statement, and I really appreciate that. And I can grow from that. And the third part that is always the hardest for all of us comes from the 6 Right Livelihood Guidelines. Pause. Breathe. Listen. So often we just jump to defend ourselves. It's our human nature, Before there was civilization, we had to run from things like saber-toothed tigers. So we're kind of hardwired to defend ourselves. And in a modern day society, mainly it's about emotional or other kind of mental situations that we're defending ourselves from. But that pause, just giving yourself that time to reflect. It's probably 99% of the time when I just react and say something, it's not the wisdom thing to say. The pause is so important to gather your thoughts, to really go to your deepest place of wisdom in your heart rather than in your brain. And then the final thing is to really be curious, to explore the skandhas, to really begin to sort of that journey of kind of, that's the skandhas again. That's me becoming I, me, my, this, me, belongs to me, my little heap here. And I want my heap because I'm right when I have my heap, and my opinion is what matters. So basically when it comes down to it, when we get wrapped in those skandhas, I have this image of being shrink wrapped. Like there's no way for me to breathe when I actually just have all of this sort of tangling going on. But I try to look for that one little pocket in the shrink wrap. There was a wonderful monk who lived here for several months because he got kind of stranded here during COVID. His name was Brother Fat Fu, and he was from Thich Nhat Hanh's order. And I think he learned a lot from us, but I think we learned a lot from him too. And one of the things he taught me, and he reinforced it about a few days ago when I talked to him, he said, where is my freedom in this very moment? Where is my freedom in this moment? It could be a terrible moment. It could be something where someone is saying something really angry at me. Or it could be something where I'm just frustrated because I can't get my stupid bulk tank to get clean or something. Or there's a million examples of that. But in every moment, there's a freedom to be found. Our job is to be curious and to find that freedom. It's not always easy, especially when it involves multiple people with multiple opinions and multiple views of the world. But to pause, breathe, depend on our breath, listen, to find that moment of freedom. It's what will ultimately, I think, help us to grow. The only one other thing I would say about the balance of yearning and contentment is that there is a positive aspect to yearning. A lot of that positive aspect comes from those moments when we have a Dharma spark, when we are at that moment of like, wow, there's got to be something deeper to life. A lot of us have experienced that during and after, we're not even after it yet, but as we move to the next stage of the COVID pandemic, we've sat and said, my life is not the same, and it never will be. How can I change my life for the better? What are those moments of freedom I can find, and how do I deepen? And that's about spiritual practice. Sariputra had that kind of a moment too. When he was young, he was very wealthy, went to all kinds of festivals, had a lot of fun. And he went with his friend to a big festival in their town. And they both, his friend's name was Mahamoggallana, who was the other sort of right-hand, left-hand person to the Buddha. And they were close friends their whole lives. And they went to this big festival, lots of dancing, lots of music, lots of food, lots of drink, lots of everything that most people see as really the core of what they want in this life. And they looked out over the big field of hundreds of people dancing and reveling. And they just didn't connect. They were like, there's got to be something more to this life than just this clinging to this kind of lifestyle. And then they found the Buddha, and the rest is history. We have those moments too. They're really called glimpsing our Buddha nature. And the people who are farther along in the path and more awakened really see deeply into Buddha nature. So I'd like to end today with asking Ma'um and Haju Sunim to help me in a blessing for you all that we say and that we'll do together. And it's from this wonderful book by John O'Donohue that's called To Bless This Space Between Us. And the name of this poem is, or blessing, is called For the Unknown Self. But I would rename it to call it For the Buddha Nature in Us. So I will ask Haju Sunim to start us, and then go to Ma'um, and then back to me. So we'll each do a sangha and ring the bell in between. So we would ask you to straighten your posture. You put your hands together in hapjang of sincere heart, and listen very deeply from your core as we do this. Blessing for you.
So much of what delights and troubles you happens on a surface you take for ground. Your mind thinks your life alone. Your eyes consider air your nearest neighbor. Yet it seems that a little below your heart, there houses in you an unknown self, who prefers the patterns of the dark and is not persuaded by the eye's affection or caught by the flash of thought.
It is a self that enjoys contemplative patience, with all your unfolding expression, is never drawn to break into light. Though you entangle yourself in unworthiness and misjudge what you do and who you are.
It presides within, like an evening freedom, that will often see you enchanted by twilight, without ever recognizing the falling night. It resembles the under-earth of your visible life. All you do and say and think is fostered deep in its opaque and prevenient clay.
It dwells in a strange yet rhythmic ease that is not ruffled by disappointment. It presides in a deeper current of time, free from the force of cause and sequence that otherwise shapes your life.
Were it to break forth into day, its dark light might quench your mind, for it knows how your primeval heart sisters every cell of your life to all your known mind would avoid.
Thus, it knows to dwell in you gently, offering you only discreet glimpses of how you construct your life.
At times, it will lead you strangely, magnetized by some resonance that ambushes your vigilance.
It works most resolutely at night, as the poet who draws your dreams, creating for you many secret doors, decorated with pictures of your hunger.
It has the dignity of the angelic that knows you to your roots, always awaiting your deeper befriending to take you beyond the threshold of want, where all your diverse strainings can come to wholesome ease.
All beings, one body, I vow to liberate. Together?
All beings, one body, I vow to liberate.
Blind passions, one root,
I vow to terminate.
Dharma
gates, one mind, I vow to penetrate. The great way of Buddha, I vow to realize.
And now for announcements. Is it you, Mom?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Hayun, for a very nourishing Dharma talk this morning. I think it made us really go to a place of deeper understanding of the skandhas and our Buddha nature. So really appreciate it. If you want to continue this nourishment, I want to talk about a few things that the temple will be doing and is doing to continue to nourish your spiritual practice. You may know, you may have heard on the news that the case count of COVID is way, way down in Washtenaw County. And so we are looking forward to moving back to in-person services very soon. Details about that will be forthcoming. Please read the e-bulletin so that you will know when and how the in-person events will occur.
And
we have a big...
Will we still have this?
Yes, and we will still have this.
Just from another place.
Yeah. So, indeed, because over this period of the pandemic, we have gained many friends from all over the place, and we want to continue to bond with you and have you part of our journey. So, but those of us who are local would love to be together in person. So that's what we are aiming for. Currently, the in-person offerings that we have are meditation in the early morning, midday, and evening. So early morning practice is at Burns Park. Those who would like to come with us, we meet at the temple at 6 a.m. and then walk up to Burns Park. If you're joining us at Burns Park, come at 6:10 a.m. And it's not every single day of the week, it's most days except for Wednesday and Saturday. Midday meditation is here in the Sangha house, and we are able to open our doors and you can meditate on the deck 11:45 to 12:15 every day. Evening practice also is in the Sangha house and out on the deck 6:30 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. So let us know if you're planning to come to the midday or evening so that we can be sure to have a mat and cushion ready for you out on the deck. We continue to have still some Zoom and virtual events. On Wednesday evenings, we have a member sitting that we live stream from the temple, including meditation practice and a Dharma discussion. On Wednesday morning, there is a study group, Way of the Bodhisattva, that meets on Zoom. So please let us know if you're interested in joining, and I will send you a link. And Recovery Dharma continues to meet by Zoom. If you are part of that group, look for information regarding some changes in the Zoom link and things like that. So Recovery Dharma is the Buddhist version of Addictions Alcoholic Anonymous. If you're interested and don't know about it, contact the temple. Other information, go to zenbuddhisttemple.org or call the temple 734-761-6520. And we thank you for your continued generosity and financial support. Also, we just love to get emails, letters, and begin to hear from you. Any other announcements? Okay. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please enjoy this beautiful early summer day.
Yeah. And we love to hear your messages just by chat. After the service, we kneel around together and share